Hey guys, it's Papa Nasty here, and today I'm doing a video about Lord of the Rings, Rise to War. Specifically, I'm going to be looking at the evil direct damage commander rankings. Now, our ranking scope is that we're only looking at evil commanders. We're also only looking at commanders with 2 or more direct damage abilities. And we're going to be ranking them on the basis of those 2 best abilities maxed out, which is the equivalent of if you're R6 at level 40. Yeah, there's lots of different ways we could do this. This is the way that I've chosen to do it. Maybe I'll look at R10 level 50 or something like that later in another video. Now, we're going to be specifically looking at ability damage, not the base stats. So the amount of commander damage that commanders have by default varies a little bit, and that would just make the math of the calculations just a whole lot more difficult. So it doesn't make a huge amount of difference, so we're just not going to factor that in. Also, we're only looking at direct damage, not troop abilities. So we will mention troop abilities, but we're sort of looking at where the commander is going to be applying damage, not just giving plus attack or plus defense or something to troops. Also, as well, it's going to be based on 10 rounds of combat, and it does not factor in relics. So first thing is we're going to be looking at Sauron, but we'll just go over how I've set this up. So I put a yellow box around the abilities that around what I believe are the 2 best direct damage abilities to use, and then at the top of these boxes I put percentages. These are the percentages, just some basic math really, like 260% focus damage times 2 formations, and then they'll cast this 3 times over the course of a 10 round combat. So 260 times 2 times 3 equals 1560. And I've done that for both abilities and then added them up and put the total next to Sauron. So 2,730% damage is not very high. That's actually extremely low. Sauron is not a good direct damage commander. I do not recommend giving him your best in slots because he is not going to utilize them well. This does not mean that Sauron is a bad commander. It just means he's a bad direct damage commander. He's still a great commander because he's got these amazing sort of status effects and things that you can use. And the great thing about these is that you only need to put 1 out of 10 points in to get his, his stun or his madness and things. So just bear these sorts of things in mind when looking at this list. This is not about which is the best commander. This is about which commander is going to put out the biggest numbers for damage. Next, we've got Witch King. Now, usually, of course, Witch King, you will spec him for sort of troop as a troop commander rather than as a direct damage commander. But he is actually a very handy direct damage commander too. And both of his abilities that he's got here will also do status effects. So much like Sauron, he's not just there for for damage. He's got his status effects there too. Although you do need 5 and 10 points respectively to get his stuns, whereas with Sauron you only need 1 out of 10 in each of his abilities. Now, one of the great things too with the Ring Wraith is that if you have high enough initiative, then your ability will be unaffected. It will not be affected by White Council. And in addition to that, Ring Wraith just absolutely smashes out its damage in the first 2 rounds. So Ring Wraith is really, really effective at getting that sort of early damage in, and it is a really, really strong ability. It is, even though it only does 2,000% damage, and there are a lot of abilities that do much more than that, it is a very strong ability. And so that's what sort of makes Witch King potentially viable as a direct damage commander, because he can smash that Ring Wraith damage out early. But in saying that, I still use him as a troop commander, not direct damage. So read into that what you will. Next, I put in Adun. She's kind of like an honourable mention because she's not very good. Now, she does have 3 damaging abilities, but Black Nemerian, it's only 1200. That's, I mean, unless you've got a Frenzy Hammer, that's not very good. Also, as well, you've got sort of, you've got Spellseeker and Reaper, one of which is focus damage, and the other one is physical damage. And so it makes it very difficult to gear for her, and her numbers only come out to 4,400% anyway, so she's not actually, even if you could get amazing gear for both focus and attack, she's still not going to be putting out great numbers. So she's difficult to gear for, and she doesn't actually do that much damage. And she doesn't do sort of status effects and things either. So she's really not that good. I know that a lot of people have said that she can be good. Not really. Next one, Sauron. Now he's just got his 2 abilities here that he does, and now the big thing to notice here is that, okay, Voice of Sauron, it does inflict madness, but it also only does 1500% damage, whereas Of Many Colours is doing 3420%. So that's more than 2 times the amount of damage from Of Many Colours. So make sure that you prioritize your Of Many Colours if you want to get big numbers. In particular, you need to get it to 10 out of 10 because it's sort of it's gaining, deals the same amount of poison damage once again at level 5. Deals the same amount of burn damage once again at level 10. So you really need to sort of commit to Of Many Colours to get maximum value. Also, of course, Saruman has his R5 ability, Sharky, which is an extremely good troop commander buff. So he's very nice, even as you level up further. Kamal, he's a little bit of a surprise on this list, I think. I think many people would be surprised to see that he is actually... He has the potential to deal more focus damage, more elemental damage than what Saruman does. And I think that would surprise many people. Because not many people would necessarily see him as that way, and they would see that Saruman is more of a direct damage commander than Kamal. Great thing about Kamal too, he's got that Ring Wraith ability, which is doing stuns, and as well it can avoid White Council, and then a Shadow of the East that can prioritize targets with the highest defense. Targets with the highest defense most likely don't have very high focus on their commander, and as a result, they will likely take more focus damage than if their commander had high focus. So that's just kind of a little bit of priority targeting for Kamal. But after these 2 abilities, his other 2 abilities are not that great. So he's sort of not so great if you're a big, if you've got high reputation and things. Next one, Cestro. Yeah, he's got 3 abilities, which is really nice because his Lord of the West and his Ring Wraith are both really good already. And then, as you go past level 40, as you go past reputation level 6, he's also got a Spellseeker that you can pump up too. So he can deal some really, really nice damage. And even with just his first 2 abilities, he's doing nice damage. But then he just keeps on going because you've got Spellseeker as well. Skullhelm, much the same thing as Cestro. You got your first sort of 2 great abilities. Executioner, look at this 3,600% damage. That's more than Saruman's Of Many Colours. And then as well, you've got your Dark Ranger, which Dark Ranger it will hit 1 to 3 targets. So it's a little bit variable. 2,700 is the average of that. Is if you hit 2 targets each time. Skullhelm, you just pump out really good damage because these 2 main abilities are really strong. And then on top of that, you've got Ring Wraith as your 3rd ability, and Ring Wraith is obviously a really, really nice ability. I mean, for me, I actually prefer Ring Wraith to Dark Ranger, even though it does less damage, simply because it's putting that damage out early in combat, and as well it's got its stuns. So that for me is a very nice thing. Also, something to mention too is that if you have Warcry, if you use if you have the Warcry set, then that will actually apply to Executioner for the entire duration of the fight. It will it's not just going to apply for the first 3 rounds. That'll affect Executioner for the entire fight. So that's a nice sort of bonus. I mean, this is why part of why Skullhelm is so popular. Skullhelm is seen as the sort of best direct damage commander at the moment for evil side. Next we're going to look at the physical commanders. Over here on the right, we've got our elemental ones. They're all nicely ranked and things. But our physical direct damage commanders, I've put in Calon here. He's got an honourable mention of 3000%. Now, obviously, if you still had a Frenzy Hammer, then his Spear Dancer ability could potentially deal a lot more damage. It still wouldn't be good, but you deal a lot more damage. Also, he does have one of the great things, the sort of honourable mentions about Camille, is the fact that he does have another ability that scales with when he attacks. He reduces their stats at the same time, and so he's got sort of he's a little bit better than his 3000% makes him look, but definitely not anywhere near the same league as the others, especially as well because he starts as tier 1, as mighty. His base stats are a fair amount lower to begin with. You need to upgrade him to sort of epic and then to legendary in order to actually compete with the other commanders that have high reputation levels. Next, we've got Lathar. Now, a lot of people have sort of, I know a lot of people feel that Lathar is decent, that he's got potential. 4,200%. I mean, he's better than Adun because he doesn't have weird gearing, that you need to do. So even though 4,200 is a little bit lower, he's doing status effects via Weapon Master. He can avoid White Council via Weapon Master, and as well he's just all physical damage. So that's kind of nice. But 4,200, it's not in the big leagues. He's definitely a sort of lower ranked commander, lower tier, in regards to usefulness, and especially he doesn't have a third ability that's actually good. Anyway, next we've got the Undying. Now, Undying is very popular, mainly for his sort of evade ability that a lot of people like. Now, I've ranked him at 4,400% because I've taken his the 3,600% that he would get from Undertaker, and then I've deducted 1,000 for the fact that it's replacing his regular attacks. This is also factoring in that he's hitting his 3 formations for 120% each time. So Undying, he's hitting decent numbers. He's doing more direct damage than what Lathar is, and at the same time he's also got his evade ability and his heal ability that you can sort of just tack on as a bonus to him. So that's very nice. He's very solid. Alertz comes in next. Now this is now we're getting into the true physical damage dealers. So 5,200%. Also, as well, his base stats are slightly higher than Shadows for when we look at Shadows. And as well, his damage increases with each attack for his Uruk-hai Firstborn. It doesn't specifically say how much it increases by those, so I couldn't really factor that in, and he's just at 5,200. Also, his third sort of abilities they're not damaging abilities, but they will increase his stats. So that's kind of nice that he's not just getting some third ability that's just sort of doesn't synergize with his direct damage at all. He's actually got a decent third ability. Next we got Shadow. Now, so here he's got Black Nemerian, Undertaker, Shape of the Void. Shape of the Void and Undertaker are the first two that you take for sure. And then now he does have his R3 ability as well, which sort of gives him just some extra stats. I didn't include that on here, but because usually you'll take Black Lemurian rather than the R3 ability, but if you feel that you are a little bit under-geared on your Shadow, then you take the R3 instead of Black Lemurian. But if you feel that you're comfortable with your level of gear, then you take Black Lemurian as your third skill. But either way, Shadow pumps out huge amounts of damage because of his follow-up synchronizes so well with Undertaker. I calculated it out to 5,375% damage, which is the 90% follow-up for round 1 to 6. Hitting 3 targets for 120%, and then I've minused 1,000% for his, the fact that he's not doing sort of normal attacks during that time. So Shadow, really, really nice. And then the surprise on the list, well, I think it'll be a surprise for many anyway, is Agzok. Now, he has more potential, and I say potential, for damage than Shadow or Alertz, if you take his Pursuer and his Shadow in the Mist. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat to this, though, because he is a tier 1 or mighty commander, and so in order to that means that his base stats, his base commander damage, is much lower than Shadow or Alert's to begin with. And if you if you upgrade him to Legendary, which is extremely difficult to do, then he will exceed them, especially as he has. You see here, he has a 3rd and a 4th direct damage skills that he can choose from, and they're not particularly high damage skills, but however they're still extra damaging skills, so he has a huge amount of potential, but also as well, just his Shadow in the Mist does so much damage that he is comparable with Shadow and Alertz. It's worth noting though that because this is essentially a bleed, in order for him to get the maximum damage from it, he does need to have high enough initiative that he applies his Shadow in the Mist before the enemy units or sort of units take their turn. Otherwise, on round 10, he would potentially miss one set of charges, and then as a result, he would be slightly lower than Shadow and Alertz. But anyway, he is very, 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 very strong, and a lot of people don't rate him simply because he's tier 1, but he is very strong and very, very strong. And next, coming in at number 1 for the physical damage dealers is Oglog. Now, he's got a similar thing though to Agzok, in that he applies a bleed, which he'll apply it in round 9, and the bleed he might not actually get all of the bleed damage done before the end of combat, and so even though so his total damage might actually be a little bit lower, if his initiative is quite sort of low, and as a result, if he was last to act in round 9, then he'd need to get the full damage from his round 9 Gron's command. He would need a lot of hits on his bleed targets during round 10. Also worth noting too that he doesn't have a 3rd damaging ability, but his troop abilities are really strong. So so even though he's only got 2 damaging abilities, he's still really good. And really good as he's got a lot of potential as a DD commander. You just need to have the right sort of setup for him. Anyway, that is that is my sort of ranking list there. It's a pretty decent length video, 20 minutes. I hope that I hope that it's been useful to you guys. And one of the big things that I am hoping for is that people can look at the abilities here and how much damage they're doing as a percentage, because a lot of people don't think of that when they look at commanders. And as a result, I see some commanders that are from players that are spec'd sort of, we'll just say incorrectly, that are spec'd suboptimally, and as a result they're not getting as much damage out of their commander as what they should, simply because they've selected the lower damaging abilities rather than the higher damaging abilities. Also as well, a lot of players, they don't realise just how effective some of these commanders are. And they choose commanders, they choose to use weaker commanders rather than they put a stronger commander on the bench, because they just don't realise that, say, Camul can actually pump out decent damage. And others, like, they'll use, say, Sauron, and they give them, their obsidian dagger, their protection of Numenor, and their fine smoking pipes and whatnot. And they don't sort of realise that actually they're not getting much value out of that equipment. And I hope that anybody who's watching this video can now use that to prioritise their best equipment for their best commanders. Anyway, thanks all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please like and subscribe and whatnot. And if you didn't enjoy it, then don't subscribe. And if anyone's got any questions, then please feel free to ask them in the comments. Cheers. Thanks all.